Welcome to Your Stars Within. I'm Little Wave, and today we're going to talk about the fourth house. Picking up here on our house series, I hope that you've watched the recent video on the bones of the chart, because the fourth house is where the IC starts, and that's one of the most significant spots in the chart. I want you to think of the fourth house as traditionally ruled by Cancer, which is the mother, the moon, the home, the childhood, the roots, right? Ancestry, heritage, carrying familial karma, the deep within, my inner self, my soul. Are you getting a picture? That I see, the dark line that begins the fourth house, is really potent. It's inside. It's things that change within us or within our home, or could be the mother. Sometimes the more passive parent, usually the mother. So as we talk about the fourth house, I want you to think about that when something is on that bone or there's a transit that's going to hit that spot, that's going to be the strongest part of it. As we get further away into the fourth house, it's still going to have an effect, but the closer to that bone, the stronger the impact, the more you're going to see it, like see something real happen or change in that person's life. So let's talk about your natal chart. If you look at your chart and you see that you have planets in your fourth house, what does that mean? Well, for one, it tells us a lot about your childhood and what that was like growing up for you. And you and your siblings could have very different fourth houses, because your childhoods could be a really different experience, even though you're growing up in the same home with the same parents, right? What it feels like to you is really personal. And so we kind of internalize a lot of those feelings from our childhood, and it becomes sort of our inner self. So when there's difficult, challenging energy there, it tells me that there's probably some challenges in the childhood that now you walk around housing, right? These are now struggles that you have inside of you that maybe keep you from being able to rest or to soothe. And if those planets are maybe something like Venus or Moon, something much more soothing, then it tells me that childhood was a really happy place to be, and that allowed you to grow into an individual with a really happy inner life. So let's talk about the different planets. So if you have the sun in the fourth house, let's think about the sun, right? The sun is how you show up in the world. It's how you project your energy. It's the life source. Where the sun is where the light is shined. So think about the sun is shining on your inner self, or on your childhood, on your family. So often a person with sun here, family is extremely important for them. There's probably a lot of communication, conversation, back and forth. Like there's a lot of time spent with family, that this person is very much defined by their family and where they're from. You might see some karma here. Sometimes looking at a couple generations, you might find that there's a couple generations, me, my mother, my sister, my child, right? We all have our sun in the fourth house or on the IC. So that kind of tells me that you're passing the torch to one another, that there's sort of a soul group lesson happening, and you're each passing the torch to the other to take it to the next step. When the moon is in the fourth house, the emotion, right? The moon, it's in its home here, right? But it tells me emotions are going to run super deep. And probably home was a place that we went to feel cared about, to feel nourished, to feel our feelings. Home was maybe safe. Home might have also been emotional. Sometimes the moon can be fickle or moody, because we want to remember the phases of the moon happen quickly. It moves very fast. So it could tell me that the mother was moody, or that the feelings in the home changed a lot. But overall, I find the moon here to be more positive emotionally. Now, there could be things that alter that, right? So if the moon makes an aspect to say Mars, or maybe the fourth house here is an Aries, something that it isn't going to feel good because that would be in square to the natural ruler, Cancer. That might be more of a harsh childhood, more similar to having Mars there on the IC. So you have to take some things into consideration when you look at these placements. If we have Mercury in the fourth house, the person's mind, right, their thinking process is going to be very much about the past, very much about roots and heritage. They might enjoy, like looking into their family history and roots. They might be a person, depending on some other aspects, that really like the history of things, that might tell us a lot about, the history of, certain materials, or the history of certain places, or how certain things came to be. So they might be very interested in understanding sort of the roots of things in life. If Venus there is a lovely spot, that tells us that this person was well loved. Their childhood home was probably very warm. Probably the mother is a good friend to them, feels very loving, caring. There's just a lot of love to be shared. This person may also really enjoy beautifying the home, because Venus likes to sort of decorate and pretty everything. And so they might enjoy spending a lot of time in their home. There might be a lot of changing the home, maybe like always buying new things for it, that kind of energy. I would also say that they love the familiar. So when we look at Venus as relationships, they may like people who are familiar. They may tend to marry someone from their childhood, or want people that feel similar to their family of origin, that they may, just generally speaking, really like that warm, cozy, familiar feel. Now, if we've got Mars on the IC, this is not ideal. I don't like Mars on the IC when I see it. Usually feels very harsh, like the upbringing was harsh, it was loud, there was a lot of yelling or aggression. The person has a hard time inside because they've internalized that, and now they're harsh on themselves and they yell at themselves. Or they might find people who replicate that for them so that their home kind of stays aggressive. When Mars makes some negative aspects, sometimes you see abuse in the home, domestic violence, or maybe this person was abused in the home. So it's not a placement that usually speaks. It's taking the deepest part of the self and the soul and kind of like agitating it, right? Like fire and grating on it, it hurts. So if you're looking at synastry and somebody puts their Mars on your IC, that's not going to feel very good. That's going to become probably pretty unhappy pretty quickly, unfortunately. Those kind of aspects can really sour an otherwise happy chart. When we look at Jupiter on the IC, now that's a lovely placement. Jupiter, remember, is a benefactor. He's gregarious. He's happy. This makes for a very happy home. Maybe there was many children in the home. Maybe there's many generations in the home. Whatever it is, it felt big and warm and happy. And so the person has internalized that, and probably inside easily kind of returns to a state of inner happiness. When we talk about Saturn, Saturn's kind of militant here. It could be like a father who was maybe controlling of the mother, maybe a military family, maybe a family with a lot of rules or rigidity. Saturn here tends to have a controlling aspect, that there was some kind of controllingness in the home. And often people with Saturn on the IC have internalized that, and so they're very critical of themselves, very hard on themselves, always kind of like holding themselves to really unrealistic expectations in a really harsh way, right? That they're not gentle with the self. And have Saturn maybe make some helpful, easy aspects, maybe that can help alleviate some of that energy and look at some ways to more positively use that, because Saturn does always have the potential for sort of the wise father, being able to do the right thing, be respectful, choose wisely, that kind of energy. And when we can embody that, we can use the more positive aspects of Saturn to manifest things in the world, because Saturn is material. He can make it real. When we look at Uranus on the IC, that's not a favorite aspect for me. I find that the person's soul is just kind of never settled. There's this constant sort of churning. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do with it, but there's just a not soothed and settled aspect. And maybe the person's home changed a lot or in some ways was unknown. So if there's other aspects that maybe indicate, like it reminds me of maybe growing up with like an alcoholic parent or something, it doesn't have to be that. It's not indicating exactly alcoholic, just something that the parent would be very unstable, or like you would come home on eggshells, like unsure, is today a happy day or am I going to get screamed at? You know, kind of not knowing what to expect, really unexpected in the home. Now, if that makes a nice aspect to maybe Jupiter or something more positive, maybe that can be like a happy but unusual home or very eccentric parent. Something like that it can outlet, because Uranus is not necessarily negative, but in the place of home and soul where we want to be nurtured, right? Like milk and honey, think like that, right? That's where we don't want erratic surprises and the intellectual genius. We just want to be held and loved. So sometimes it just feels cold there. But it can also be a lot of change. So it could be changing homes, things like that. But it could be eccentricity. So you know, very different type of home as well. With Neptune, you know, Neptune is very dreamy, it's idealistic. So this person probably feels that their childhood and their home was really lovely, was probably idealistic. You know, they really have warm, happy feelings about their childhood home, but that may not be the case. You know, there might have been other things going on. Like a sibling might say, I think it was kind of an abusive home. How do you think it was ideal? Where they're kind of really blind, because Neptune's really a fog, and it can make you really, really blind to some pretty glaring issues. So you may not be able to see clearly the home life. But other interpretations, Neptune could rule drugs, so there could be drugs in the home. On the other positive end is spirituality. It could be a very spiritual home, very spiritual mother, that type of thing. Could also be music, a very musical home. So those are all different possibilities with Neptune, but I would say often the person can't see the issues, whatever they are, that existed in the home. Also, if you have Neptune on your IC, or maybe you have a transit of Neptune to the IC, you tend to have issues with water in your life, especially water in your home, flooding, pipes bursting, things like that. And then Pluto. I don't like Pluto here either. Remember, this is the soul, this is the infant that wants to be held and nurtured. We don't want, Pluto is power and control. Often with Pluto here, somebody was very powerful to that person. Often there's abuse. I would look at the aspects on that. But a harsh upbringing, that speaks to me of difficult challenges that probably really hurt that person. And that their life is characterized, at least for the beginning, of really trying to transform that energy. Now, Pluto has that really powerful transformation, right? It's Scorpio energy. So it's the caterpillar to the butterfly, the phoenix rising. And so we all like to think about that end, right, where it rises. But I always want to remember that caterpillar turns to mush in the cocoon, right? The phoenix has to die to rise, right? Has to be ashes to arise. And so the Pluto process is the whole thing, not just the ending. And so this person has a great capacity to regenerate and to restore themselves, but they will probably completely fall apart before they completely transform. So that's a life of deep, deep inner work. And probably a really good counselor or guide would be really helpful with that transit. So those are my thoughts on the fourth house. I hope that that's helpful to you. Obviously, it's more than just what planets are there, what sign is it, what aspects do those planets make, and then like what sign it is, where is that planet's ruler. So there's a lot of things to think about when evaluating a chart, but just getting these basics where you really understand where your planets are and what those effects are will really help you get a good start and help you to really understand a more involved reading so that you can really understand your chart. So I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you for watching my videos, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future.